Before I conclude this video, I want to talk about the relationship between symmetry and subjectivity. In the scenario where the block sphere was isolated, there was no objective orientation of the z direction. All orientations of the z direction are equally equivalent. You can't distinguish one from the other. Saying that there is an objective orientation of the z direction is like saying there is an objective up direction in a completely empty space. And so if we think of the thought experiment of Alice and Bob floating in completely empty space, and imagine that for both of them, they view up as being the direction from their feet to their head, then if they're oriented differently with respect to each other, then they have two completely different notions of up, and there's nothing to say who's right and who's wrong. So in their scenario, they are stuck in a situation where up is entirely subjective. And this is due to the lack of anything breaking the symmetry that they can see beyond themselves. There's no stars, there's no planets, there's nothing outside of themselves that can give them any sense of orientation. So subjectivity gives rise to something like pure subjectivity. But if instead, imagine there was some sort of a large structure that suddenly emerged to one side of them, like an infinitely long plane that seemed to go on forever, then suddenly they would have some objective direction that is independent of their mere subjective opinion, which is to say, in this direction, there's a giant mass, and in this direction, there's nothing. But then imagine that suddenly that giant mass generated a gravitational field and pulled them toward it. So now they can stand on this structure. Now suddenly they both gain some sort of objective notion of up because both of their feet are on the surface. And this is essentially the scenario that we're in reality. The only reason why we have some sense of an objective up is because we are all entangled to an environment that seems to have a consistent structure and is predictable. And so because of that, the classical reality that we all live in gives us a notion of up. But even this notion of up isn't absolutely objective because our notion of up comes from the gravitational field of the Earth. We know that if we want to go up, then we have to do work against the gravitational field. And so what we have is a radial vector from the center of the Earth going outward, and anyone standing on the surface, their up is the outward radial direction. But for one person on one side of the planet and another person on the other side of the planet, what is up to one person is down to another. And even so, as we pan out from just our Earth, we see that our Earth is floating around in space. And so this scenario of a lack of objective up is actually the reality that we experience every day. And you can imagine, like, if we got rid of all of the stars, like if there was some pocket of space in which all directions looked the same, then we would be exactly in the scenario where there's no objective up. As I said in my previous videos, there isn't infinite energy and matter to create infinite symmetry breaking. This means that there's always symmetries that give rise to simultaneous realities. And these realities are the same and not the same. They're the same in that they're all related by symmetry transformation, but they're not the same in that the realities they create depend on the relative relationship between the system and some external observer that breaks symmetry. This means that looking at the symmetry from different perspectives actually gives rise to different realities. This is the physical nature of perspective or subjectivity. So that's my argument, everyone. An observer is simply that which is external to the system, which can then break symmetry, thus creating information and creating reality. And I use the example of a qubit to show that prior to measuring the qubit, it doesn't have any information because the outcome of the measurement entirely depends on the orientation of the measurement device or the observer. And so all of this is consistent with my larger view of quantum mechanics, which is that quantum mechanics is a consequence of a lack of information. And from that lack of information arises symmetries. And this is precisely what quantum states are. They are symmetries. When you're talking about what a qubit is SU2, because any concept of a state of the qubit is merely an idea of the orientation. But as we showed in the video, any transformation of the orientation in isolation without reference to anything else is merely a symmetry transformation, which results in nothing happening. And so all orientations of the qubit, of a quantum state, that are a result of a unitary transformation by Schrödinger's equation or whatever, is the same reality. So the lack of information results in a symmetry, which results in simultaneous realities. And the difference from all of these simultaneous realities actually comes from the perspective of an observer. And this perspective is merely a subjective difference because we know that all of the orientations must be identical. And so, what I'm saying is that it appears to me that quantum mechanics, or the observation of quantum mechanics, is the foundation of subjectivity and subjective freedom. How you perceive things affects how you create. And in the video, I didn't make a comment about whether or not the observer has to be conscious or not. At the moment, I don't think that it does. I think that it merely requires a difference in orientation, or a relative orientation, to allow for the creation of a state of reality. But what I will say is that all things that are conscious are observers. And so, in my working model of reality, this ability for there to be freedom, subjective freedom, is actually the basis on how we're capable of creating reality and how we're involved in creating reality. Um, and so, at the foundation of all of this is something like a paradox. Symmetry transformations are strange paradoxical objects, or strange paradoxical things, because they are defined by the fact that when you do the transformation, nothing's happening, which means that all elements of the symmetry must be identical. But at the same time, there's some sense in which they are not identical. And this can only occur when you have differences in perspective. And so this is why I think that at the foundation of subjectivity is actually physical reality. And this paradoxical nature, I would argue, is also the foundation of the essence of algebra, where the idea of algebra is to change something without changing it. You're merely multiplying by identity, or one. And one of the examples I like to use is the idea of the square root of 2 divided by the square root of 2. Now, if you take the square root of 2 divided by the square root of 2, and you multiply the numerator and the denominator by the square root of 2, what you get is 2 divided by 2 times the square root of 2. The 2's cancel, only leaving 1 over the square root of 2. If you put the square root of 2 over 2 next to 1 over the square root of 2, then you'll find that they're actually the same thing. They only look different. And so this nature of subjectivity, I think, is the nature of, in essence, of algebra. And as Anton Zeilinger and Nicholas Giffen point out, is that information is actually created at the moment of measurement. And so what we have is a situation where, in my interpretation of quantum mechanics, quantum states arise due to a lack of information. And when you make a measurement, you are actually creating information, which is to say, you're actually creating reality. And this is what an observer is in quantum mechanics. It is actually the active participant that is involved in the process of creation. So I hope you guys liked the video. I hope that it was convincing. If you did like the video, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to make a comment in the comment section. If you think I'm full of crap, let me know. If you think that I have a good idea, also let me know. That could give myself a pat on the back. And if you know a physicist or a scientist or a philosopher friend, and you think that they would be interested in this, please share it with them and ask them if they think I'm full of crap or not. So with that, I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay turtling, my friends. Peace.